Trask going to keep it, and the lane opened up wide for him. Untouched, Kyle Trask into the game and into the end zone. What a stunning comeback here by Florida tonight.
After review,
It's 12.
Michigan State had 12 players on the field when the ball was snapped. Replay, fourth down.
Got to do it again. 47 rather than 42. He hooked it. Arizona State wins it.
It was another crazy week in college football. You're listening to the Playoff Committee. I'm Chas Messman alongside Chris Gleason and Ike Everard. None bigger probably or more exciting than that Arizona State-Michigan State game. I know the members of my fraternity and our fraternity house, we were going crazy chanting, missed that kick, missed that kick. And he missed it. 12 men on the field penalty, had to retake it.
Yep.
Jaden Daniels, true freshman, leading the Sun Devils down the field. Game-winning touchdown. What a game. It was ugly. It was old-fashioned. It was physical. But dang it, those defenses were good.
Yeah. Classic defensive standoff.
Yeah, I really enjoy those kind of games. I was over at my friend's apartment. He didn't like it as much, but I think that those kind of old-fashioned defensive games are really, really entertaining, and I think that both teams played their hearts out.
I think that was a great national coming out for ASU's defense, too.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't know what to expect after those first two games. They looked great, but you're playing Kent State and Sac State. It's like, all right, how are you going to react against a top 20 team in a Big Ten environment? And they didn't miss a beat. That could have been Sacramento State wearing the green and white. You couldn't even tell.
Exactly, and it's a big-time game because Michigan State's quarterback, Lewerke, he went to Pinnacle. And
Exactly. And in the two games, back-to-back years, he did not perform to his usual standards.
Absolutely.
Lewerke only had, he only threw for 291, but no touchdowns, only a quarterback rating of 555 or 55.2, and he had that big fumble too on that rush. That changed the game.
Yeah, and I think Ashari Crosswell deserves a ton of credit for forcing that fumble because when that initially happened, that did not look like a fumble. It looked like he was down, and then he lost, and you see it, and he jars that thing out right
just
before
as
he was
his knees
down.
touching. Exactly.
Game's only turnover. Huge play.
And ASU's defensive backs, the tackling in this game was absolutely superb. I mean, fourth down, coming up big on Elijah, or what's his name? Cameron Hayward.
Yes.
The
Elijah Collins is the other running back.
Yeah, Elijah Collins is the other one. The DBs balled out. I mean, Michigan State's front seven was amazing. Could you imagine a defense with Michigan State's front seven and those ASU defensive backs? Jack Jones, the transfer who's been absolutely great, only been here for a couple weeks. Ashari Crosswell, Evan Fields had so many tackles in this game. Was it 15?
13.
13.
Yeah.
As a defensive back, are you kidding me? You kidding me?
That special Tillman safety spot,
Yep.
man, and he's really finding his comfort level there for sure.
And then you got Chase Lucas, obviously, who was
a
fired
shut
up
down
after
corner.
the game. Yeah.
It's incredible. I might be the old guy on this podcast, but I remember as a freshman in 2016, the last game of the season, they lose something like 56-40 against UA, and they missed like 2 tackles on every other play. It was horrendous and made me hurt on the inside to watch. And watching the turnarounds is just something else. I can't put it into words.
Herm will cure your hurt is what
Always.
we're seeing. Yeah.
Exactly. I think there were 2 plays where they weren't able to tackle well, and those are the 2 big plays. But at the end of the day, Coughlin, the Michigan State kicker, he had a rough one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See the way he ran out there for that second kick?
Yeah. Yeah,
That was
and
great.
in that last kick when he had to retake it, his form was just not good. He stepped way too close to the ball. It wasn't even close. As soon as he kicked it,
Yeah.
you know that kind of felt like there was an earthquake the way the table moved in the studio real quick. California, kind of used to that. Where are you guys from again?
I'm from Seattle, so.
Oh, that explains
Yeah,
your
that's the
rankings.
UW
You'll
connection,
get
yeah.
that. You'll get that in a little bit. But yeah. What about you?
From Central Connecticut, representing New England and the East Coast over here.
Oof. Alrighty. So, big reason why I wanted to do this podcast with different people. Recency bias has been a big issue in college football for years and years. The SEC's always been. Maybe they are the best conference in college football. However, teams out west might be getting overlooked because 7 p.m. kickoff here is a 10 p.m. kickoff back east, and all the writers and the voters are going to sleep early. Players have been missed out on Heisman's and et cetera because of it. So really trying to get more, what's the word for it?
Diverse
perspectives, exactly. So moving on to that, we'll go to a Midwest showdown in Iowa. Very close game, got delayed because of lightning. They stormed the field. I know that went crazy on Barstool. And but yeah, Iowa State, that muffed punt, one of the
That was ugly.
Oh man,
for such a well-coached team.
Yeah.
It was a shame to see the game end the way it did with the two players colliding and then Iowa just pouncing right on the football.
And shout out to former ASU punter Mike Sleep Dalton who had that punt. Ended up being
Who needs
the
Mike Sleep Dalton when you got the Turk?
Oh yeah, exactly. We're not missing him. I think he's missing us. But hey, that's a good Iowa team. So
yeah,
kudos to him for finding a new home.
No, that was a fun game for sure.
Alrighty, guys, we're gonna transition into the players of the week. For me, I went with Jalen Hurts. So far at Oklahoma, he is absolutely balled out, and he did something in this game that not Baker Mayfield or Kyler Murray did. He passed for 250 yards in a quarter or and a half, and rushed for 150 yards, or rushed for 100 in the quarter. His final stats ended up being 289 yards passing with 3 touchdowns and 150 yards rushing with a touchdown. I mean, in Lincoln Riley's system, we've seen his passing just absolutely flourish. The thing he struggled with at Alabama, he's just been great at. His efficiency is what's really impressed me. I mean, a lot of that probably has to do with the scheming, and Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray broke back-to-back NCAA efficiency records, if I'm not mistaken. And Jalen Hurts he's the Heisman favorite so far this season. I mean, he's got the story coming from Alabama, sitting behind Tua Tagovailoa, and I can't be happier for the guy. You can't meet a better kid, and he's absolutely gone with his opportunity and ran with it. We know what type of runner he is. Probably one of, if not the hardest player to tackle in all of college football. He's like a running back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I didn't think that he was going to be able to show a lot when he came to Oklahoma. I honestly was not that impressed with him at Alabama, but you were right. He has shown a lot.
So yeah, sometimes all you need is a change of scenery. Like you said,
Exactly.
Lincoln Riley has really proved to be the answer to his woes. I mean, already passing for 880 yards this season, 9 touchdowns, no picks. He's been sacked twice. He leads his team in rushing too. I mean, 373 yards and 4 touchdowns. I mean, I don't want to be that guy, but you do want to take a look at the level of competition through these first 3 games. Houston is probably the best team they played, based on what they did last week, because after that they played
UCLA's not
South
good.
Dakota, and yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
but that doesn't take away from, you can't control who you play, and he couldn't have done better.
They don't play a lot of good defenses. The best defense they'll probably play this year, prior to a playoff or anything, will be Texas, and then I'd probably say Iowa State. So there's 2 legit defenses on the schedule. He's going to put up the numbers to get in the Heisman conversation, especially if they win out. They beat Texas. They beat Iowa State, who's given them a lot of troubles over the past couple years. He also has the most important thing, maybe, is that storyline.
Yeah.
Storyline means so much in the Heisman. And he's got it, And I mean, the guy, the character is off the charts. Nick Saban.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think Nick Saban has loved a player like he's loved Jalen Hurts. The way he talks about him, I mean, yeah, Jalen Hurts is just, you can't be happier for a guy.
And speaking of storyline, if they can get it to the point where it's Jalen versus Tua for the Heisman, I mean
that'll be something.
That will not compare to any recent
No.
Heisman races that I can remember.
Maybe a little dark horse in there, Jonathan Taylor. The guy is just
he gets overlooked.
He gets overlooked because he's playing in a subpar, I'd say, Wisconsin team that will get overlooked because of their lack of ability to throw the ball down the field and convert on 3rd and long.
Subpar offense. Don't underestimate their defense, but yes.
Exactly. No, I mean, former Jets defensive back Jim Leonard has got those boys whipping into shape. They really take on his characteristics and, gritty, tenacious. We'll get into Wisconsin soon, but we'll segue into your guys' player of the weeks.
Okay, well, I mean, my player of the week, I want to bring it back to that ASU game because for me that was the game of the week.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the easy choice here is Matt Coughlin. I think he was probably the most valuable player to Arizona State in their victory. But on the Sun Devil defense, Jermaine Lelay is a guy who didn't necessarily light up the stat sheet. He had 1 sack, he had 1 QB hurry, but he was a consistent force on the defensive line, and he disrupted so many plays that.
And the timing of those plays is probably what was, the biggest
so
factor.
clutch. I don't think that this upset would have happened if it wasn't for his presence on the field.
And it's funny, people talk about this ASU defense, and they love talking about the linebackers. They love talking about the defensive backs. And I remember talking to Lole in the preseason, and he's saying we want to be just as respected as the other position groups. And you look at like Lole and DJ Davidson and George Lee. I mean,
exactly.
These are good players. Players like Shannon Foreman and transfer Roey Wilkins are backups, are guys that rotate in on this D line. They're just as important as to the unit's overall success.
Yeah, I mean, Davidson had the Mandrake jersey last week. They're making names for themselves right now. So
Evan Fields got it this week, 13 tackles, like we said. All right, Chris, who'd you have?
Yeah, for my player of the week, we all obviously, as Sun Devils, love our true freshman quarterbacks, and I think the one that stood out, without a doubt, this week was Dylan Gabriel for the Central Florida Knights, marching in there as the 17th, they were home, so they were hosting Stanford as a 17th ranked team. Stanford was only a week removed from being a ranked team, and UCF laid it on them. We were talking about how the 45-27 final does not do justice to how much of a blowout that was, and that was in large part due to Dylan Gabriel, 22 for 30. I mean, I'll say that again, 22 for 30 is, for when you throw for 347 yards and 4 touchdowns, that's a heck of a game.
This is Stanford that we're talking about. Even in a down year, they're still a very strong program.
Exactly. I think the problem with Stanford is Davis Mills. He just hasn't been that player that we thought he was out of high school. KJ Costello is clearly, the way he runs the offense, as a senior and everything, there's a big drop-off.
Yeah. And, just to add context to what I said before, this game was 38-7 at halftime. 38-7. So, it's almost like the whole second half was garbage points for Stanford.
Yeah.
Alrighty, we're going to now move into the top 25, starting with number 25 through 20. At 25, our official show rankings done by the point system that I created a couple weeks ago. At 25, we had TCU, 24 Cal, 23 Virginia, 22 Boise State, 21 Arizona State, and number 20, Mike Leach's Washington State. All right, we'll start with TCU. They just beat down Purdue 34-13 with a ridiculous running attack. Gary Patterson, great coach. It seems like they have an off year, and then they just rebound stronger the next year.
Yeah, and, that's a team that always has built its brand on defense, since you remember, ever since remembering kind of their come up with Andy Dalton and
the
that Rose
Boise
Bowl
State
team.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, obviously, again, Purdue is not the most impressive Big Ten team. They lost to
Especially with Elijah Sindelar was out this week.
Yeah, but you know what? They got a lot of votes to be ranked, and you know what? They came out and they beat them very handily, so I think they should jump into the rankings.
And the thing that I got to say about TCU's defense that impressed me in this game, they held Rondale Moore to 25 total yards. 3 catches, 1 rushing yards. They completely shut down one of the most electrifying players in the entire country.
Arguably the top wide receiver recruit for the draft.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or he's only a sophomore.
All right, okay.
He's only a sophomore,
right.
so we'll go a year
right.
from now. I think the top one is Jerry Jeudy from Alabama. That guy is just...
That's true.
He might be the number 1 overall pick. But, going back to TCU, if you're able to shut down a Rondale Moore, that gives me a little bit of, idea of what kind of defense they are, especially going against all these Big 12 shootout offenses. When you got to go against a guy like CeeDee Lamb at Oklahoma, it shows that they really do have a shot of taking them down.
Yeah, they always coach up those defensive backs so well. And looking at their schedule, they've only played, that was only their second game of the season. They played Arkansas Pine Bluff. So we haven't seen much out of them other than this Purdue game, but yeah, I definitely think they do deserve
And Darius Anderson, almost 200 yards on the ground, absolute great. We'll segue on to Cal. Didn't look so hot in their last game. However, they had the big win a week ago against Washington. I know it's a weird... I know there was that lightning delay, but nonetheless, that Cal defense is for real.
Yeah.
They're legit. Like, the offense, say what you want about it, it's not great. However, their defense can stack up against any offense, and I think, they got a shot at really causing some problems.
Yeah, much like I think the Sun Devils, their defense will keep them in games, and if their offense can develop, they've got a chance to break the top 20, I think.
Yeah, I think Cal when you compare them to ASU, they're kind of thinking a similar thing for this season, that the defense is going to have to be their strong unit, is going to have to carry the offense. And one name everybody has to know on that Cal defense is Evan Weaver. He was phenomenal in that Washington game, which I did stay up to watch.
He had, what, 15 or 16 tackles, correct?
He had like 20 in that
20?
game. I mean, I'll check that.
The guy was just all over the field. I know. I mean, I didn't watch the whole game because I was, tired.
Yeah.
But I had a long day. But anyway, that guy in the highlights just jumps off the screen when you watch him.
And that Washington, I mean, it wasn't just 20 tackles. He was adding sacks. He had an interception. I mean, he's like the clear-cut leader of this defense, which in that game in Seattle, that was for them. We talked about how this week was ASU's defense's coming out party. That was for Cal 2 weeks ago.
Dude, they held Mason Fine of North Texas, one of the most prolific passers in the country, to only 210 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Like, I know it's North Texas, however, that passing attack puts up some big numbers.
I would have expected more from them this past week, which is why personally I didn't have them in the rankings, but I can definitely respect them making it just because of how impressive they were to go up in Seattle, regardless of the circumstances, and come out of there with a W.
Mm-hmm. Moving on to Virginia, they beat a poor Florida State team 31-24. Yeah. I mean, that's a program that's just gone down the toilet. Yeah. I mean, flush it, all the way down. I mean, Willie Taggart doesn't seem like he's going to be the option. He might be fired in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
There can't be anyone in the Power 5 who's on a hotter seat right now.
Jeremy Pruitt?
I wouldn't think so.
Tennessee?
Yeah, okay.
Tennessee.
That's probably up.
In terms of like major programs, I think Tennessee's just in the worst crap hole right now. And then Florida State is right there.
Yeah.
But I mean, Florida State, they were good a couple years ago with Jimbo Fisher. I mean, what was it? Only a couple years ago, they were in the top 4, won an Orange Bowl with DeAndre Francois. He went down with an injury.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Next thing you know, they're awful.
It's only 6 years after they won that national championship with Jameis. I mean, talk about a tumble.
And there's still good players in the team. First-round picks with Burns a year ago. But yeah, Virginia, how do you guys feel about them? Like, I see what they are. We saw a lot last year. Perkins is a good quarterback. They got a good defense. However, I haven't quite seen it on the field yet, which is why I've been hesitant to, move them any higher than where I have them right now.
Yeah, I mean, this game, they didn't gain a ton of yardage. They won the field position battle, and they pounded the ball in the end zone with their running back. Wayne Talapapa had 3 touchdowns on only 53 yards, so it's not ideal. It's not what you want to see from an offense necessarily, but they got the job done.
Yeah, and early in the season, you kind of have to have some understanding that there is going to be shakiness with these teams. And to me, the way I look at it is I give Virginia credit. I know Florida State is a floundering team, but, they played a Power 5 school. They're not to take shots, but they're not Cal, who went and played North Texas or something of that sort. And I think, to me, for them to come out with an 8-point victory at the end of the day against what is a Power 5 team, I have to give credit where credit is due. And
Bronco Mendenhall has done a really good job with that program so far.
Yeah, and they're so much farther than what Virginia football traditionally is, so you got to tip your hat
Exactly.
to them.
Number 22, a very similar team, I would say. Boise State. They got a true freshman quarterback playing. Another team that beat Florida State in the first week of the season, I believe.
Yes.
Hank Bachmeier starting to look a lot better, which is expected as a freshman quarterback. He threw for 238 and 2 TDs in this game. That being said, it was against Portland State. But, they're in the Mountain West. I think they're probably the best team in the Mountain West. In fact, they are the best team in the Mountain West, with Fresno State not quite being what they have been in previous years. But, a very similar team. I think they're a solid team. They're not going to push for a New Year's Six because I think that's UCF, clearly, right now. But, they're a solid team, and they're easily within that 20 to 25 range. And I think they'll kind of be around that range the entire season. Probably win about 9-10 games. They're a good team.
Yeah, I've had a hard time taking them seriously ever since Chris Peterson left. But what I love about this team in this game is they had 8 different players get carries. And, the running back with the most carries had 6. So I think that shows a really nice balance on offense between different playmakers, and it shows that maybe they can make some waves in an untraditional way.
And to go off your point, I mean, like you said, Chaz, they played Portland State, so take it for what it's worth. But yeah, I mean, 5 different players had multiple catches, and you look at those top 5 guys in receiving yards, they're all between 44 and 79 receiving yards. So it's good to see that balance in a game where, you're playing an inferior opponent. It'd probably be easy to be exposed if you just had a superstar. Like if Arizona State plays a team like that, Benjamin's just going to light up the stat sheet, and maybe Brandon Ayuk, and you don't see too much from everyone else.
A lot like the Sacramento State or the Kent State game where it's like...
Oregon State last year when went off.
Yeah. Moving on to Arizona State after that big win at Michigan State. Obviously, we know about the defense. The offense hasn't been as good. However, the offensive line, I think, with the injuries and stuff, starting a 17-year-old at a tackle position, I mean, against Michigan State, that clearly makes a difference. The one concern for me is Benjamin hasn't really quite gotten going yet. He's only at 209 yards. He rushed for 39, I believe, against Michigan State. That being said, it was against the best run defense in the entire country. But Jaden Daniels has been impressive. The most impressive thing for me, that big 0 in that interception column.
Yeah, people are really overlooking that part of the offense. And it's funny because it's so similar to the way people did that with Manny Wilkins. You're always trying to find what they can do better. People always felt like ASU's offense should have lived up to a higher standard under Manny Wilkins.
Which it could have, because he did. That being said, the difference I've seen between Jaden Daniels and Manny Wilkins is that a third down play where he threw the 45 or the 40-yard bomb
to Ayuk.
Yeah, to Ayuk in the fourth quarter of that drive. That is a pass that Manny Wilkins missed repeatedly.
Yeah. And to Ayuk's credit, he did kind of make an adjustment to make that catch, but
a better throw is probably a touchdown.
Yeah, exactly.
Jaden's deep balls have looked really good though.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and you can't his legs in that game. There were a lot of plays that he made where he just maybe got a yard or 0 yards, but avoided the sack. He's not taking a lot of sacks, and on 4th and 13, to have the composure to just pull it and run it, first down, the one inside the 10 to bring it right before Superman stretched it into the end zone.
And it's not just the 0 interceptions. He hasn't turned the ball over. He hasn't so much as gotten blindside strip sacked and lost a fumble. So that can't be overstated enough, because he's not. You can't expect him to be some superstar gunslinger as a true freshman, but that's what you need for him, to just play smart, turnover-free football and give the defense a chance to allow them to win the game.
Exactly, and Herm said in a press conference afterwards, that's what they expected. They just needed to keep it close, and if they kept it close and made the plays when they mattered, they knew they'd win the game. And that's exactly what they did. Jaden Daniels has been incredibly efficient. His efficiency's been off the charts. He's got a 153.3 quarterback rating this season, 728 yards. So it's not like he's only throwing screen passes, which he did a lot of in the last game, making sense. It had to be part of the game plan, because you didn't want to take a lot of chances throwing the ball down the field unless you had to, and you couldn't really run the ball because Michigan State's front seven was dominating the game. But when it matters most, he's made the plays.
Yeah, no, he definitely has. I think we have him higher than the AP poll does, and that's because, they know that they can win these games.
Exactly, and that defense is no joke.
No.
Yeah, I think anyone who had any doubts, they still have Pac-12 play ahead of them, but
Steven Montez and Laviska Shenault coming into town on Saturday.
No easy
that'll be another test for that ASU defense, because they haven't really had quite the passing attack that Colorado has yet. We've seen what they were able to do to stop the run and, just basically shut down that Michigan State team. But Michigan State on third down a couple times was able to go and create, jump balls and stuff. Number 25, I can't think of the name right now.
Oh, Darrell Stewart, I believe.
Yeah, Stewart, that's right. The kid from Texas. The kid from Houston. Laviska Shenault's a better player than him. So that'll obviously be a test, and it'll be interesting to see whether or not it'll be Kobe Williams, Chase Lucas, or even Jack Jones, who's probably the best athlete out of the three, covering him, but I'm excited to see what they can do against it because, like I said, Steven Montez is a good quarterback.
Yeah. And,
he is.
ASU, as far as defensively, every week is a new week, but they, just from being around the team, they've really embodied the attitude and just the culture that
The Mandrake culture.
Yeah, the defensive coordinator, Danny Gonzalez, has tried to instill. If you watch his press conferences after each of those 3 games, he's not happy. He's not satisfied. Each time he said we should have shut them out. Each time he said what they had to improve. And he does start with himself. He says in the Michigan State game that the last 50 seconds, the fact that they got even a field goal attempt was his fault for making bad calls. And so I think it's really a unit that buys into each other, and now
they want to be great.
Yeah, in their second year under this coach, you're seeing it start to come together, and I don't think people can really underestimate them anymore.
Alrighty, guys, moving on to number 20, Mike Leach, who said, the Sun Devils have some mystical spirit. If there was a Pac-12 battle or something, mascot battle.
It must be considered.
He might be the most entertaining coach in all of college football. Professor. Well, both ASU and Washington State got professor coaches.
That's right.
Although Mike Leach teaches battle strategy in football.
What I wouldn't give to take that class.
Oh.
They apparently had to take they had to write an essay and stuff. They selected 50 students or something like that. That must have been one of the most entertaining.
100%.
That'd be so cool. That'd be so cool.
I mean, Herm has been doing it at our school here. He gave a presentation last week. Second semester, he's gonna be a little bit more involved. Correct me if I'm wrong. Doing presentations, working at ESPN really is why he's here. Can be a lot of help. But let's talk about Washington State. That was their first real game of the season.
Yeah.
I thought that they were gonna get upset there for a long time during that game, but they stepped it up when it mattered, and they showed why they are a ranked football team.
And people who didn't watch or even just didn't pay a little extra attention to the box score, because I did watch a chunk of that game, and that was essentially a road game for them. It's marked as a neutral site game at a neutral site game against Houston and Texas.
Yeah.
Coming from Pullman, Washington. So that needs to be, any pragmatic person needs to be looking at that as a road game for them. They did not start strong. They were losing at halftime, and I think the way they came out just firing in the second half and overall responding, finishing strong, that's what you look for out of an elite team, which is what you are if you're ranked in the top 20.
And of course, as any Mike Leach quarterback, Anthony Gordon is putting up numbers. The guy's already passed for 1,300 yards and 12 touchdowns.
Yeah, that's not a surprise.
Exactly. We're going to see whether or not, he's Gardner Minshew, Luke Falk, maybe even a Graham Harrell, or if he's just, one of the other guys that just kind of falls below the radar in the big moments, throws some picks, can't really come up with a big play as they move forward. Their next game, is against UCLA, so I expect them to put up a lot of big numbers. But the real test, and we're going to see how good of a team they are, is when they go on the road to play Utah in 2 weeks' time.
And you know who they're playing in 3 weeks' time, or specifically where they're going to be?
Arizona State. That'll be an exciting game. I'm excited to be able to go. I haven't been able to go to a football game yet this year because I was doing the board up and the halftime show here for the first game against Kent State, and then I was covering high school football on the Friday game. Friday
night.
I'm excited for this weekend, and now we'll move on to 19 through 15. Number 19, we have Iowa, obviously coming off that crazy win and the lightning storm over in-state rivals Iowa State. 18, Texas A&M. 17, Oregon. 16, Penn State. And number 15, Washington. So a couple of one-loss teams in that bunch. Texas A&M obviously losing to Clemson. Oregon in the first week to Auburn. And then Washington in that game against Cal. We'll start with Iowa. It's a basic Iowa team.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see anything special about this team. They run the football. They play defense. Nate Stanley's a decent quarterback. But it seems like in the clutch, he kind of throws some picks. He makes some dumb errors, I've noticed. And as a senior, I was hoping he'd be able to improve on it. And still, obviously, it's early in the season. When we really see conference plays, we're going to see whether or not he's really taken that next step forward as a quarterback. But, yeah, I mean, classic Iowa team.
I mean, yeah, they lost their 2 big tight end threats. Those are his safety blankets, so he's adjusting. But I think that it's big that they were able to pull off this win against Iowa State, and I think that they'll be able to build on it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they were a little bit lucky to, as we mentioned earlier, be on the right side of that whole muff punt ordeal. But, that's a rivalry game, and as they always say in college football, anything goes in a rivalry game, no matter how good you are, let alone Iowa State got the most votes to be ranked of any unranked team in last week's AP poll before they played.
And Matt
Iowa.
Campbell is one of the best coaches in all of college football. I mean, they beat Oklahoma on the road a couple years ago. They're a good football team. Brock Purdy's a good, gritty quarterback. At the end of the day, there's a very good chance that Iowa State drives down the field and scores, a winning field goal. If that muffed, not even muffed, collision muff? I don't even know.
Collided, fumble, punt.
Bottom line, Iowa State, they basically tossed that game away, in my opinion. But, game day was there. My dad went to Iowa State, and he was telling me about how his buddies were like, dude, this is the craziest we've ever been. They've been partying since, 7:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
Gotta love it. Midwest, good old Midwest college
Exactly.
football.
Moving on to Texas A&M, big win this weekend. It was Lamar. But, the most encouraging thing was Kellen Mond. His accuracy was a lot better. He was 20 of 28. That was the thing that really cost him in the Clemson game. He was wildly inaccurate. He hasn't quite been what he was at the end of last year. But at the end of the day, Kellen Mond's a good quarterback, and it's a good Texas A&M team. And their schedule is just, they probably play the hardest schedule in college football, and it's not getting any easier.
Yeah, and that was a factor. I mean, I ranked them a little bit higher, I believe. We'll find out soon enough, but I like to give teams credit. They went out and played Clemson, the top-ranked team in the country, the undisputed national champion when you look at how they played last. And, Texas A&M didn't keep it a one-score game, but 24-10 is not a terrible result against a juggernaut like that, and kudos to them for challenging themselves.
Especially being in the SEC West. They got to go play Auburn this weekend. And then in 2 weeks' time, they go play Alabama. 2 weeks from that, Mississippi State. Then they got to play at Georgia and LSU to finish out the year.
That's right.
I mean, I'm not going to try and overhype them, but if they win out, they're still going to be in the playoff contention.
If they beat Alabama and Georgia,
Well, if you beat Alabama, LSU, Georgia, and then probably Georgia again in the SEC championship,
you're in the playoff for sure.
Exactly. They're not out of the playoff picture yet.
I don't want to sound too crazy, but it almost feels like they could be a 3-loss team that gets considered for that number 4 playoff spot with that schedule. Now, you never know how it's going to play out and how those teams are going
exactly.
to continue.
I just don't see them
exactly.
I just don't see them getting through that brutal schedule. It is an absolute gauntlet. Oregon. Justin Herbert, he's looked good since that Oregon game. I mean, the Auburn game. And at times during the Auburn game, he looked really good. A top NFL prospect. It seems like the defense hasn't quite been there. And the big moments are what I've really questioned this Oregon team so far under Mario Cristobal. But, they're a good team. They're one of the best one-loss teams in the country. Obviously, they're not out of the playoff picture. They played a nobody, blew them out. That's what Oregon usually does. They play usually 1 year. They play the Auburn game and they play a couple of nobodies before.
Pac-12 I agree with you. They've never really been able to step up in the big moments, even when they played Auburn for that national championship, a while back. But I've never really bought into the Justin Herbert hype either. And obviously, he's a good quarterback, but I just don't think he has what it takes to actually carry them into the top 10. And I know they were ranked highly to start the season, but I just haven't seen much from him.
Yeah, we're kind of still waiting to see. That's arguably them, I would say, with Washington, probably get the best recruits in the Pac-12. And
well, I just see USC, but USC is just kind of
it's close because you also look at performance and I mean, USC does definitely, and Stanford. I mean, I get those arguments for sure. I guess I should have maybe reworded it like a combination of getting the best recruits
and coaching. And this was a team that people were very high on. Like, I think I had them in the top 10 going into the season. Like, it's a good Oregon team. They got a couple decent backs. Dye can run the football. It's just the defense has always been the question for Oregon. And they're playing Stanford next week. I still have no idea how good of a team Stanford is. In week 1, they looked good against Northwestern because Northwestern's a very good team. Completely shut down a former 5-star in Hunter Johnson. And then they, back-to-back weeks, just get absolutely torched in the secondary by, USC and UCF.
And now that USC loss is not looking good after USC lost to BYU.
Yeah, I was very disappointed in that.
Yeah.
Keaton Slovis, obviously a young quarterback. I mean, a couple of mistakes that a more experienced quarterback doesn't make, and USC gets out of there with a tough road victory.
Yeah. He looked so good, though, when he debuted.
Oh my God, he looked like Sam Darnold 2.0.
I was really surprised that he played so poorly against BYU, but BYU's a good team.
He's a freshman quarterback. I mean, everyone has bad games.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at Bo Nix, even against Oregon. Obviously, in the clutch, he stepped up. He threw for less than 50% completion percentage. Obviously, in this game, Slovis threw a pick the end of the game in overtime. Yeah. I think he had two or three on the day. He just didn't look good, but.
Well, it's important to add on to that. He's a freshman quarterback that's been thrust into the starting role.
Exactly.
Based on injury, not a Jaden Daniels or a Bo Nix.
He started as the fourth.
Named the starter. Yeah.
He started as the fourth quarterback on the roster.
Yeah.
And he balled out. He beat out Mac Fink, and Jack Sears is now transferring from SC.
Right.
So USC season's not over. They still got a lot of teams to play. They could really find themselves in a Rose Bowl situation if they're able to win out. That big Notre Dame game. Pac-12 is finally looking like top to bottom is now really rounding out. Going into the year, I thought this was a Pac-12 resurgent year, but I didn't think they'd get a playoff team just because it seems like they just beat each other up.
They do.
Because they're all good, not great. They're a bunch of good teams. There's no standout team as of now.
Yeah, it's always been the narrative.
Moving on to Penn State. I mean, James Patterson, good coach. They did not look great against Pitt. They probably should have lost that game. However, it's a talented team. I still don't know what I'm getting out of them because obviously they won a nitty-gritty game, and when it counts, they were able to grind out the result and get the win. But again, another one of those teams, it's so early in the season, I don't know what I'm getting from them yet.
That's got to be the most unimpressive win, I would say, of any of those ranked teams. Maybe it's up there with Iowa, but again, I give them a pass because they were on the road in a rivalry
and
game.
it was against a very good Iowa State team.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean
hostile environment.
That's a lot of start and stop in that game.
This was a home game for them.
Yeah,
exactly.
And Pitt always does seem to give Penn State trouble. They beat them on that field goal a couple years ago. But, yeah, it's still no excuse, obviously. It's 10-10 at half, and then Penn State scored the only touchdown in the second half, which, is not how it should go.
Penn State's run defense did really well. They held, Pitt's leading rusher only had 9 rushing yards, but Kenny Pickett threw for 372 yards. That's got to be a concern, when you got to go against the likes of Justin Fields at Ohio State. And Shea Patterson hasn't really gotten it going yet, but if Michigan's able to get that rolling, it's definitely a concern.
I just wonder if we expect too much from Penn State because obviously their program was in such a downward spiral after all the allegations and the scandal that happened, and they picked up so quickly with Saquon Barkley that I think that we see them as now a power, even though they may not really truly be sustainably at that point yet.
They are one of those, traditional blue bloods that is always going to get a pass when maybe they don't look as good as they're ranked.
No, when you get down as badly as they did, it's hard to recover from that.
And the next couple weeks are a great chance for them to bounce back. You go at Maryland and versus Purdue. They really, to maintain that ranking, they really need to look like a powerhouse team in those next 2 games.
Yeah, I mean, we're really going to see where this Penn State team's. As for most teams, once conference play really opens up, first couple of games of the season, mistakes happen, busted assignments, sloppy play. Exactly.
Yeah.
New players, guys coming in who haven't played before. It happens. At 15, we have Washington. Washington's an interesting team. Jacob Eason at quarterback, one of the most talented quarterbacks in the entire country. A bit inconsistent. that weird loss to Cal, the lightning delay and everything, you're a lot higher on them than the rest of us are. It's a bit concerning to me, the inconsistency. I don't necessarily trust Eason yet. We know that Chris Peterson can coach up those DBs, and they're going to have a good defense. Losing Myles Gaskin, I'm not sold on their run game yet. I don't see them making a run at the playoff this year.
That's fair. I mean, if you look at their run game specifically, Salvon Ahmed, he's been hailed as the next Christian McCaffrey by a lot of analysts, and he ran 8 times for 83 yards. That's over 10 yards a carry. And then a freshman, Richard Newton, had 3 touchdowns on 8 carries. So they have that kind of ground and pound. They have that duality of a good running back between the 20s.
They might be the most well-rounded team in the Pac-12 North.
Yeah, that's fair. And Jacob Eason, he started at Georgia as a freshman.
Mm-hmm.
And
former 5-star. The guy is wildly talented. He might be
the
second. I think he's the second most talented quarterback in the entire country behind Trevor Lawrence.
That's fair. He can make pretty much any throw you want to, put him in a situation.
Oh, the dude has an absolute cannon for an arm. He's just he's mistake prone, and he's inconsistent. If he can find that consistency, don't get me wrong, Washington might find themselves, pushing for one of those final playoff spots in the Rose Bowl, Pac-12 championship games, but they lost to Cal early in the season.
But
we can't have them higher.
You got to look at that loss. Remember, the game started at 7 o'clock local time. They made it to about 8 p.m. Then the lightning hit. It was like 2 hours later when they finally restarted the game. And that game wrapped up around 1:30 a.m. And obviously it's not an excuse to lose a game, but they were clearly rattled and clearly out of sorts.
It's fun because, and it's funny, a lot of these non-conference matchups between these Pac-12 teams, like they're sharing non-conference opponents, and I will admit the way they beat up Hawaii after Hawaii beats UA and beats Oregon State definitely made a statement for them, and now they get to go at BYU, which is a team that beat Tennessee, SEC team, and USC.
They just beat USC a week ago. So another one of those teams where it's like, it's a long season. They're going to improve.
Yeah.
We'll see if Jacob Eason can find that consistency, because if he can, that's a good Washington team. Chris Peterson's a hell of a coach. Like I said, they might find themselves in Pac-12 championship, pushing for a New Year's Six and maybe even a college football playoff. Moving on to 14 through 10. At 14, we had UCF, 13 Wisconsin, 12 Texas, and number 10 Michigan. UCF put a beat down on Stanford.
Yeah, Chris, you talked about their quarterback earlier. I mean,
Gabriel. I mean, that was
Tua
incredible.
Tagovailoa 2.0, just a little less talented.
Hey, maybe the mid-major Tua if we want to brand him that. But no, I understand Stanford's got a difficult quarterback situation and whatnot, and that leaves the defense on the field for a lot. But to be up 38-7 at halftime, I mean,
It's just Stanford
impressive.
Has prided themselves for years and years on playing good defense and running the football. And they just haven't been able to do that this year.
Yeah.
Despite their talent in the secondary, they got guys that are going to be top draft picks. Probably, still, even though they've this horrendous start to the season for them, it's just I don't think it's a very good Stanford team. It's their worst team they probably had in years, especially with the loss of KJ Costello.
It's very shocking because, I remember that week 1 win against Northwestern. That was a 10-7 win, I believe, just like ASU got. And, you're looking at that, wow, classic Stanford. And, the last 2 weeks have really just contradicted that first one completely.
Exactly. They've been cut up. Like, you think, Hunter Johnson, former 5-star. Only transferred because, Trevor Lawrence came in. So it's... And then you see true freshman Keaton Slovis carve him up. And then another true freshman, Gabriel, carve him up. And it's just... I don't think they're a very good team.
And just to make sure we don't do Central Florida an injustice by not talking about them, I think, obviously it's easy with the mid-major teams get into the rankings. Who are they playing? How much they really deserve this? And it seems like over the last couple years, that bowl game against Auburn, now you look at a game like this, when they get the opportunity, they are proving that they belong in the same conversation with any of these Power 5 teams.
Exactly. UCF's built a very, very good program. Will they get into a playoff? No. Will I vote them in? If I had a vote to get them in the playoff, would I vote them in? Probably not. Just because, I don't, the conference schedule and their strength of schedule, and the talent on the field has to mean something.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They do play Pitt next week, and you talk about shared opponents and opportunities, and that definitely is a chance for them to go out, and if they can beat it by more than Penn State did, then they're going to show some people.
Don't get me
They're
wrong.
going to be on the road against Pitt.
Right.
It's not going to be in their
I
building.
think for UCF, they need to really see if they can get into a Power 5 conference. Maybe the ACC. They're not going to get in the SEC, obviously, but the ACC's on the downward, turn right now. The likes of Miami, Florida State, they're not doing so hot. They got Clemson, who's just great, and then everybody else.
I mean, they can definitely compare to some teams in the ACC. Just looking at the weaker teams, the Boston Colleges and the Wake Forests. I mean, I know, being from Connecticut, how bad Boston College is. I'm sure UCF could probably kick their butt in football and then give them, a pretty good run for their money in basketball. So
Yeah, UCF, it's just whether or not they have the money to do it.
yeah,
But they're a difficult one because they just keep winning. But I don't think they're as good as the Boise State or the TCU teams of old. Back in the mid 2000s, their defense isn't quite on that level. But you can't argue with the fact that 10-win season, 12-win season, 12 wins, 12 wins. Beating Auburn,
Yeah.
who beat Alabama that year.
At some point, they're going to have to get a shot.
and people don't realize, this UCF team has been around for a minute. I mean, they went to that Fiesta Bowl, I want to say 2013 or 14 with Blake Bortles and Storm Johnson. They've been kind of under the radar for a while now, and so it's definitely justified that they're getting their respect.
They're getting their respect, and they're getting even more respect as a program now that Scott Frost has left.
Right.
For Nebraska, who hasn't.
How's that turning?
Yeah.
Scott Frost.
They're promising. Adrian Martinez is a good quarterback, but on the road against Colorado, you got to come up with the clutch.
Can't blow that lead.
You can't blow that lead. Nah.
And you see Colorado lose the next week at home to Air Force. It makes it look even worse.
Absolutely. Moving on to Wisconsin. Jonathan Taylor is one of the best players in the country.
Hands down, the best running back in the country. I will stand by that every day of the week.
See, I think it's him. I think I think there's three. I think it's Taylor, Swift, and Etienne. I think Taylor might be the most. He's obviously the most. Well, I don't know about the most accomplished in terms of winning, but in terms of statistical. As a freshman, he rushed for more rushing yards than anyone ever has in the history of college football. Did the same thing again his sophomore year, and it looks like he's just continuing that success this year.
All in a Big Ten conference that has powerhouse defenses. Defenses that are no joke.
Yeah, we talk about Michigan State, their run defense, so it'll be a good test when they play them. They face Michigan next week, which is going to be a really big test.
That's definitely one of the
That'll
games
be
of the weekend.
100%. That and the Georgia Notre Dame game.
Yo.
It's just their passing game is brutal.
Always been lack.
Kudo, Cone is just, if they get into a 3rd and long, they can't pick it up.
No, yeah.
If they are behind in a game, I don't think they'll be able to crawl back in it because the way they win football games is control possession, hand the ball off to Taylor, and pound the rock. Maybe a little bit of play action for a little bit of deception, but we talked about Jim Leonard's defense earlier. They play defense and run the ball. But their lack of ability to throw the ball just holds this team back so much.
And I don't want you to skip over the defense too much because Wisconsin, not just this year, because they've only played twice this year. They had a bye last week, but
they haven't given up a point.
Their defense just over the last few years has proven to be arguably the best in the country, and that's what they are right now. They've given up 100 less yards per game than the next closest team in total defense. They're first in red. Again, they played 2 games, but
they played USF and Central Michigan. But yeah,
right. This goes back into previous seasons where they've proven this, and they have arguably the best defense in the country. And like you say, when you have such a good running back and such a good defense, it's really disappointing how bad their passing game is, because otherwise they're a playoff team without question.
Exactly, and being that if they can keep a game close, absolutely they can win any game.
Right. Right.
But if they fall behind, let's say in this Michigan game, Shea Patterson goes off finally. Michigan's new spread under Josh Gaddis's finally works. And they fall behind 14-0. I don't think they can come back from something like that.
Yeah.
2, maybe 3 scores down. There's just, against Ohio State, Justin Fields, if they get a couple plays that, doesn't go well, they get a 3-and-out on offense, they're in trouble.
Yeah. That's definitely, if they're put in a situation where they have to pass repeatedly to get back into the game, it can be one of those things where Cohen is going to throw, just like Hornibrook did the year before, just throw interceptions and it turns into a sliding rock and just the score looks
they
bad.
have to stay ahead of the 8 ball. And if they do, they could be a playoff team. But
Yeah.
And, if they go undefeated, they're going to be in the playoff.
Well,
if they go
100%.
undefeated, they go undefeated. They're in the Big Ten. They're going to have beaten, obviously they're in the weaker conference, but they will have beaten Michigan, and they will have beaten Ohio State probably, or Michigan State, whoever comes out of that division. And they would have beaten a formidable Nebraska team.
Yeah. Respectable.
Respectable.
they'll
Nebraska,
probably have beaten
for
Ohio
sure.
State twice because they play them in the regular season.
Exactly.
too,
They would
so-
have beaten Ohio State
yeah.
twice. Maybe even as a 1-loss team, they could get in. So, obviously, their season's not done. We'll move on to Texas. Bounced back after the LSU loss, which was a very back-and-forth game. Texas is they're a darn good football team. They just beat Rice 48-13. Sam Ehlinger went for 279, 3 touchdowns through the air. They're good. They're a good team. They're not out of the playoff conversation whatsoever.
Not by a long shot.
They still got to play Oklahoma, probably Oklahoma twice. Got to play Iowa State. This is a good football team.
They have some big tests. People are going to see what they're made of, and they're going to find out what they're made of too because they're still on the rise after a stretch of being pretty bad.
I think they have the best defense in the Big 12, along with Iowa State, and I don't even think it's close.
Yeah.
Sam Ehlinger can ball. They got some wide receivers. Colin Johnson's no joke. And on the line of scrimmage, I think they're probably the most physically dominant team in the Big 12. We saw what they were able to do against Georgia in the New Year's Six Bowl a year ago in the Sugar Bowl. Tom Herman is a good head coach. They're not done. They're a good football team. At the end of the day right now, the reason they are where they are is because they lost to LSU.
Yep.
Yeah, and, we mentioned, I think it was for UCF earlier. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, or it was Boise State, excuse me. I'm mixing up my mid-majors. We talked about, diversity of offensive weapons. I think that really came out against LSU. They were thrown to Duvernay. You mentioned Colin Johnson. Keontae Ingram is a very respectable running back, averaging 5.3 per rush so far this season. They to me, I think they, even as a 2-loss team, would get strong consideration for the playoff based on the fact that they lost to LSU.
Exactly, and the way they lost to LSU, we can't forget those 2 4th and goals that they dropped, especially the first drive of the game.
Yeah.
Perfect pass.
That's right.
Fake the screen one way, come back the other way to the running back, wide open in the end zone, 7-7. It killed all the momentum, and they were in that game down to the wire. LSU, probably the most impressive win of the season so far, in the biggest game of the year. Joe Burrow absolutely balled out. He's looking like a Heisman candidate so far.
That game, you just mentioned how good the Texas defense is. Joe Burrow lit him up. He made him look like the Miami Dolphins, to be honest.
Joe Burrow went for 471, 4 TDs.
Yeah, that's impressive.
No small feat, for sure. And that's going to be, if they can continue to have a strong season, that's their banner win. That essentially, if they lose 1 or 0 games, they're a lock into the playoffs. And
Without a doubt. Whether they play Texas or not, they're a lock in the playoff if they go undefeated or 1-loss SEC champions, just because they got to play Texas A&M, they got to play Alabama, they got to play Auburn. So many teams still, that we haven't even gotten to yet. We'll get to another SEC team right now, Florida. They lost their quarterback, Felipe Franks. Obviously, he's been wildly inconsistent. However, he's a very talented passer of the ball. No slouch in the ground game. Kyle Trask came in and won that football game against Kentucky, a team that beat them last year.
On the road, too.
Exactly.
Kentucky played really, really well.
And,
Kentucky's a good football team. We can't forget that. Coach Stoops is a good coach. But Florida's defensive line is, I think, what really separates them. They can really dominate and really cause problems for an offense with their pass rush.
That really came out in the Miami game. I mean, those were the guys that sealed the deal.
Exactly.
And really
Felipe Franks
Jared
made some
Johnson
mistakes.
crazy. Yep.
Yeah. I just don't know if they can get it done on the ground. You know, LaMichael Pirine, 14 carries, 27 yards. That's not impressive. And they just had nothing going on from the rushing attack. Their leading rusher, was one carry for 76 yards, Josh Hammond. But I think you can discount that. That's more of a fluky play. Felipe Franks was their second leading rusher, and he's gone now. So
that was a nasty looking injury, and we'll see if Kyle Trask. He's a talented player, but we'll see if he's really ready to take the mantle for that for Dan Mullen's offense.
Well, so they're ranked 9 right now, and they're not really tested. I mean, their next 2 games are home against Tennessee, who, if they play like they have already, should be a decisive win. And then they host Towson. So it's not till another 3 weeks we see them host Auburn, visit LSU, visit South Carolina, and I think we have to kind of wait until we get into October to really see if this Florida team can not miss a beat while losing their quarterback, because you want to give a team a chance until they prove that they can't be even close to as good without your starting quarterback.
To be fair to them, Felipe Franks, for all the big plays that he would make, all the clutch plays or whatever, he'd also make a lot of dumb mistakes in big moments.
That's true.
We'll see if Kyle Trask, obviously he's not as talented. He would have won the job a year ago. But we'll see if he can be a little bit more consistent, see if they can get Pirine in that run game going. They have time. They got time. Tennessee and Towson are 2 games that they should win and win handily. So another team, undefeated, SEC, playoff possible. I don't think they're going to get there, but, their season is far from over.
They're still alive.
They're still alive. So are all these teams, basically.
Yeah.
1 or 2 losses in a Power 5 conference. As a 1 or 2 loss team, as a Power 5 champion, you're going to get a talk for the playoff.
You'll get a talk. If you're Pac-12, you probably won't make it, but in any of the other 4 conferences,
I think a 1-loss Pac-12 team, depending on how the other conferences go, can get in just because of how the middle of the pack has risen.
Yes.
And some of the teams, there are some teams in the Pac-12 with their out-of-conference schedule that could get in.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I know USC's not ranked right now. However, I think if they're able to win out, they'd be in the playoff conversation. I don't think they're going to win out. I'm not saying that. With a true freshman quarterback now, who's been thrust into the limelight, as good as he played against Stanford. We'll see how he plays against a top 10 team in Utah.
Yeah, if Oregon's 1 loss turns out to be Auburn, then obviously
if Utah's an undefeated team, they'll be in the playoff for sure. We'll get to them later. Michigan. Wisconsin, they got the Wisconsin game this week. They had the bye week. They didn't look great against Army, but at the end of the day, they got the job done against a very solid Army team who was coming off back-to-back 10-win seasons. Very similar to Wisconsin. They play great defense. However, this offense under Josh Gaddis, he's calling plays for the first time. Everyone was saying they're going to move to the spread. They're going to move to the spread. Very similar to the way that they Joe Moorhead's offense that they ran with Trace McSorley and Saquon Barkley back in the day. However, they just haven't been able to get going. I don't see a lot of RPOs with those very, very talented receivers that they have. Shea Patterson hasn't really been unleashed yet. He hasn't been great. His accuracy's been an issue. No denying that. But he hasn't been great.
I mean,
the play calling hasn't been great. The shackles are what has been frustrating me with Shea Patterson, with his ability to, run the football, run the spread offense, get him outside the pocket, get him running, use his legs a bit.
Yeah, they ran the ball 45 times that game. They only passed it 31. So, you talk about moving to the spread, but then you outpace your passes and run, 14 more runs than passes.
It seems like, obviously when you run a new offense, it does take time to get used to. And that bye week is probably huge. They can work on some things that they haven't worked on. And I think this might be the weekend that they explode.
I wouldn't be shocked.
Best chance.
Exactly. Yeah. This is the best chance for them to basically be like, all right, it just took us a little while to get the kinks out, but now we're good. Shea Patterson, former 5-star quarterback, uber talented, dual threat, great wide receivers. They got running backs. Charbonnet concerningly only rushed for 3 yards a carry.
Yeah, 33 carries, 100 yards. That's
Yeah. The most concerning thing for them
the
has been their lack of ability to pick up short yardage. Michigan over the past few years, while they could not pass the ball down the field effectively, consistently, short yardage, they're money. This season, they haven't been able to do that.
Yeah, you mentioned Shea Patterson. I mean, we're really still waiting to kind of see this guy's full potential. This Mississippi transfer, coming into the Big Ten and really showing everyone what he can do. We're still waiting for that.
Last year, the offense was a big reason he couldn't, fully express himself and do what he's able to do.
Sure.
And I mean, even this season, somewhat, I feel like the play calling hasn't really been to his strengths. He hasn't played great. There's no denying that. But still, we'll see if finally they're able to explode. Because in the spread offense, we saw what he was able to do at Mississippi in flashes. He is an extremely talented quarterback. He's the best quarterback that Jim Harbaugh has had at Michigan so far.
And you know what? College football teams are capable of incredible things coming off of bye weeks, which I learned in 2017 when I saw a 2-3 ASU team come off a bye week and shut down a 5-ranked Washington and beat them 13-7. So this is Michigan's chance. I know Wisconsin had a bye week too, but this is Michigan's chance to go into Madison and make everyone completely forget about what happened against Army.
Absolutely. Moving into the top, Michigan was number 10. At number 9, the top-ranked Pac-12 school in our rankings, Utah. Number 8, Notre Dame. Number 7, Auburn. And we'll get to the top 6 after we do our own rankings, but we'll talk about Utah, Notre Dame, and Auburn. Utah has separated themselves, as of right now, as probably the best team in the Pac-12 for now. They got USC coming up. That will be a very big game to watch. We'll see if USC can bounce back. But this Utah team, great run game. Tyler Huntley, when he's able to throw the ball, that offense is very explosive. Zach Moss is one of the better running backs in the entire country. Probably in that next group of running backs behind the likes of Taylor, Etienne, and Swift, along with the likes of Eno Benjamin and those guys.
Sure, yep.
But that D-line, legit.
Yeah.
Going into this season, Coach Whittingham said it was the best he's ever coached, and we all know the type of defensive lines that they've had.
And, I mean, it's concerning that they barely beat BYU, but they've bounced back nicely and they've adjusted, and I think that they've looked really strong, especially this week.
Yeah, and I do want to bring up their schedule because we did talk about how important that is. And, they started off strong to beat BYU 30-12 on the road. Again, we keep bringing up BYU because they're playing all these good teams, and they beat USC and beat Tennessee. So, but for that to be kind of your signature win, I mean, you compare it against other ranked teams like a Texas A&M who challenged themselves playing Clemson, or ASU who played top 20 Michigan State. I don't want to take it away anything from them because they deserve that ranking, but it's just going to be interesting to see over the next couple weeks that competition ramp up. How will they respond?
Exactly. This USC game, we're really going to see what they're made of.
Yeah.
Because USC right now, obviously sitting at 2-1. Great game against Stanford. Keaton Slovis had a poor game against BYU, but USC is a darn good, talented team. Ton of 5-stars all over.
Always.
Lots of good wide receivers. Talented running backs in Malapei and Stephen Carr. Former 5-stars on the defensive front. Good secondary. USC's a good football team. The coaching is, I think, what's been holding them back a bit. And obviously, not having their quarterback hasn't helped. But Utah is another one of those teams where we're kind of just we know they're talented. We see what they can do. We've seen in flashes what they've been able to do. We just got to see it in conference play.
Yeah, and they've looked the same way over the past couple of years. They've never really been able to put it all together. They've played in the Pac-12 championship. They've been in positions where they have an opportunity to make waves, and they haven't been able to do it yet.
And people forget the OG Utah way before Pac-12.
Alex Smith and Urban Meyer.
Exactly. So, We'll see if those old ghosts of Utah past kind of come back, and it'll be interesting to see because, like I said, at USC this week, I should have specified, and then you host Washington State. So this is where we're going to find out. This is where they have to prove that those early season wins against not very impressive non-conference teams were not a fluke.
And we'll see about their pass defense because both teams now run the air raid. Crazy to think that USC's running an air raid, but now former Mike Leach's quarterback at Texas Tech, Graham Harrell, is the offensive coordinator.
That's right.
You know, I think they're going to be pretty high-scoring games, and I don't know how well equipped Utah is fit for that. However, Zach Moss and Tyler Huntley, the read options that they're able to run, the ground game, very, very strong.
There's no
They can pound the rock. Offensive line, great.
Yeah. I mean, they should be able to just continue what they've been doing on paper, but that's why you play the games, is to find out. And
exactly.
We're going to see.
College football is the craziest regular season of any sport. So, moving on to number 8, we got Notre Dame. Looked a lot better in this game.
Yeah, Ian Book looked great.
Ian Book looked good. I mean, Ian Book is another one of those guys that since he's become Notre Dame's quarterback, their offense has just blossomed. Brandon Wimbush kind of shackled them. They were pretty much RPO, run the ball, occasionally throw the ball maybe, but his accuracy was very much an issue for that. Ian Book is dual threat quarterback, but even for that, strong arm, accurate, doesn't make a lot of mistakes, and is no slouch in the run game. Can pick up major chunks of yardage, especially on third down with his legs.
Yeah, and it's going to be really fun their next couple of games because obviously we mentioned earlier Georgia, but then after that they host Virginia. So you want to talk about a team that really has a chance to prove themselves over the next couple of weeks. I mean, the Louisville game, they looked as good as you would hope, I guess, for a ranked team.
The first half they were
road.
poor. The first half they weren't good.
Yeah.
But in the second half, they started playing a lot better.
They pulled it together,
It was the first game of the season. Sloppiness happens.
Right.
The Georgia game, again, we're going to see what those two teams are made of. I mean, we're going to see if Notre Dame is going to be a team that can push for the playoff again.
They keep being so close but not quite there. And will this be the year that they are there?
They were in the playoff last year.
That's right.
They were in the playoff last year. They just Trevor Lawrence.
They got embarrassed though. So.
Trevor Lawrence just kind of.
They basically weren't in the playoffs.
Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing that people forget about. The score lines between Clemson's win against Notre Dame and Clemson's win against Alabama, very, very similar. Like, Clemson definitively beat both teams. Obviously, the Alabama game was a little bit, the flow of the game wasn't quite as much of a blowout, especially since Notre Dame's offense just seemed like they couldn't run the ball, or move the ball up the field. But at halftime, it was relatively close in that game.
It was.
The thing with Notre Dame that concerns me is their run defense, and that's a big concern for me against Georgia on the road in Athens. But that is definitely the game of the weekend. 2 top 10 teams going at it. We'll obviously get to that a little bit later. Auburn is our next team. Another one of these teams, great D-line. Freshman quarterbacks looked pretty darn good for a freshman quarterback. He's made some mistakes, been up and down. However, in the clutch, Bo Nix has come up. That final drive against Oregon, multiple third downs coming down, and then having the guts to throw it to the end zone. Up for grabs when you're in field goal range. I mean, the guy he just doesn't get rattled. Similar to Jaden Daniels.
Those guys were 1 and 2.
Ice in their veins, dude.
Dual threat rankings for quarterbacks in this past year's recruiting class, and you can see why when you watch the Tigers play.
Yeah.
That win against Oregon was huge. To come back like that takes a lot of poise when you're led by a freshman quarterback to get a comeback win, as we know all too well.
Exactly, and Gus Malzahn back on play calling duties this season. The offense has looked a lot more dynamic, to say the least, both in the run game and the pass game. Bo Nix is only going to improve as the season goes along. However, their biggest tests are still to come playing in the SEC West.
Yeah, they just beat Kent State. I mean, we know how they are, but they play Texas A&M next week, which, as you said,
That'll be
is
another
gonna
one of those just
yeah.
great games. The slate of games this weekend. Oh my God.
Yeah, we're finally
Yep.
there. We're finally getting into
Conference play starts and it's just like,
Yeah.
and it starts on Friday. USC Utah.
That's
Then
right.
you got Saturday. You got Notre Dame LSU, or no, I mean Notre Dame Georgia. Excuse me. Michigan Florida. I mean, oh my God, all day. Students start Friday night. Saturday morning we got the Michigan game, and then you just the games all the way, and you end it with the Notre Dame game. Oh man, it's gonna be a great.
Yeah.
It's gonna be great.
It's like the preseason's over, so
Like,
Yeah,
I'm-
you know.
I believe we had no games last week between two ranked teams. Like at the time
Mm-hmm.
that they were ranked, I don't think.
No,
'cause I
there
think
was.
the closest
The-
we had was
there
the
were-
Iowa one and the ASU one.
Exactly. They were entertaining games. Don't get me
Yeah,
wrong.
right.
Entertaining games. But the quality, they weren't these top 10 teams, teams that have a
Yeah.
shot at the playoff implication games there.
Yeah. No, the
Man,
ASU
I'm excited.
game was
I'm
billed
talking about
yeah.
this, and I'm like almost not wanting to go to the ASU game.
as
I haven't gone to one. I'm like thinking like, I mean, I won't be able to watch the Notre Dame game.
Hey,
and-
Pac-12 after dark. That's the beauty. You get
That
to
is.
watch all the other games.
That's
and
true.
Still hit up
That's
ASU.
true. It's just
Yep.
like the Notre Dame Georgia game. I'll only be able to see the second half. We'll see. Maybe I'll
Sure.
charge my phone. See how the Wi-Fi
Oh.
in Tempe Stadium working.
Hey,
Yeah.
go to College Bar and watch the second half, then just make it over the
Not
ASU
21,
game
buddy.
second
It's
half.
not gonna work for us.
Oh.
See that doesn't necessarily work out
Just
for
get
us.
food. Just get the food.
See, here's the thing.
I'm not sure if it'll work there. full disclosure.
Here's the thing. I mean, if you get there early enough, you could.
That's right.
But
The alms
usually they'll just
fee.
start kicking you out because they're like, all right, all these people want to buy beer. They're gonna spend a lot more money, just constant money.
True.
I mean, yeah. But anyway, I mean the games are crazy.
Yeah.
Anything more on Auburn before we get into our individual rankings?
I think we've covered the bases.
Covered the basis. All right. Now we're gonna get into our individual rankings. Ike, what were the differences that you had? Obviously, Washington, you had a lot higher than us. I had Washington at number 21. Chris, where'd you have them at?
Believe it was 21 as well. It was either 21 or 22. I'll double check that real quick.
But yeah, you had him in the top
I had
10.
him at 8. Yeah, I don't like to judge teams on weird games, and I think that game against Cal classifies as that. I think that it's most fair to judge football teams on, games that they actually can play to their fullest extent. And I'm not sure that happened on that Saturday night in Seattle. So I still have them at 8. I think they're extremely talented, and I think that they are still, definitely Pac-12 North favorites.
I definitely I totally see where you're coming from because there's legitimacy to that. It's the same way as when there's a rain delay in baseball and then a pitcher comes back into the game. You really have to take that with a grain of salt, what his
Mhm.
numbers come out to be. But I think
At the end, you go.
well, I was just gonna say that I took kind of the other end of the stick on that, and that Cal won that game, and then the fact that they came out and only won against North Texas by 6 is kind of a big reason why I didn't have them in my top 25 because the merit of them being in the top 25. Not to call you guys out, but you both did have them there, and the merit of them being there was they won this game, which was so weird, and you can't
That's fair.
really judge on. So I can speak based on my rankings that I agree
Right.
with that statement, just in a different sense,
That's,
I guess.
yeah,
For
yeah.
me, the reason I have Washington down at 21 is the simple fact they lost a game and they didn't look good in it. And Jacob Eason, like I said, is inconsistent. I don't necessarily trust him right now. As talented as he is, I think he's prone to making mistakes. Obviously, that can improve come this season. We can't forget it has only been 3 weeks. There is so much football left to play. So much crazy bonkers. Who knows what's going to happen? We all think we know what's going to happen, but aside from Alabama and Clemson, we don't really know what's going to happen. Let's be real.
No idea. there's months, not weeks left to be played.
There is
That is-
so
yeah.
much that's going to go on. Washington, for me, and by the end of the season, could find themselves in the playoff for all I know. But as of right now, from what I've seen on the field, I just cannot have them that higher than that.
Yeah,
Especially as a
that's
top
fair.
10
Yeah.
team.
And I got them at 21 right now, but I think, as they start to actually play tougher opponents where, they have the chance to display their full potential against Pac-12 teams, they definitely have the opportunity to move into the top 10.
From what I've seen on the field, I can't have them ranked ahead of the likes of Notre Dame, Utah, Florida, Texas, even Michigan for that matter, who hasn't looked great, but they've gotten the job done when it mattered. Michigan, if you look at a team like, you had Michigan and Washington ranked similarly, right?
Yeah. I have Michigan at 12.
Okay, so I had Michigan at 10. Michigan at 11, excuse me. The difference between them for me and even like a Florida team who you have in similar rankings, those teams got it done. When things weren't going well, overtime against an Army team, on the road against Kentucky, who you lost to last year, losing your starting quarterback, those teams were able to get the job done. And as of right now, I think that clearly separates them.
That's very fair.
I think I always tell this to people. That's the difference in my eyes between a good and a great team is the good teams, they're always in it and they're always competitive, like an ASU last year. And I'm not comparing to Washington to ASU because they're not in the same class. But even if they're ranked near each other, I would think it's a safe bet to think that Washington's going to be ranked higher. But the great teams get the job done, like you said.
Yeah.
Exactly. For me, the two teams that I had that we did not have in our rankings, or no, one of the teams that we didn't have in our rankings was Kansas State. I think they looked really good against Mississippi State. That was a tough game. Joe Moorhead's a really good coach. Good quarterback. What's his name? Transferred from Penn State. I can't think of his guy's name right now.
We'll find this out.
Yeah, we'll find it out. I am blanking on his name right now. I know it in the back of my head. Tommy Stevens. Good quarterback. I like Skylar Thompson, dual threat guy, Kansas State. They play decent defense, and, they have a good running attack, and it's a good Kansas State team. I mean, I got nothing else to say. It's Kansas State, classic.
Yeah, no, my thought in leaving them out of the rankings was they would be that first team that, if it was the AP poll, they'd be the first team that gets the most votes to be ranked, that doesn't get ranked, and waiting there to pounce for the first 25 to 20 ranked team that loses to take that spot. Because that's a big win, to go on the road and beat Mississippi State by a touchdown. I just had a problem when I looked at their other two games. Obviously, it's normal. You play the one tough non-conference game and then the two easier teams. But the fact that they got no votes whatsoever to be ranked in the AP poll before they beat Mississippi State, I think there's kind of steps that you have to take is the way that I see it. Although sometimes that's not there this early in the season.
And
justifiably so.
Kansas State's a team that's, when they keep the game close, they can do it. You know what I mean? They're a team, they're not going to put up flashy numbers. Skylar Thompson, like I said, he only threw for 123 yards. But he was 10 of 18 and didn't throw a pick. They held Tommy Stevens to 100 yards passing. Garrett Schrader threw for 51 as well. They did give up 201 rushing yards. Not great. However, at the end of the day, you can't deny that they were able to match up physically against an SEC team on the road. And because of that, I think it's the type of win it is. I had to put them in my rankings.
For them to outscore Mississippi State 14-3 in the fourth quarter too, that's big.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Comeback.
Yeah. No, I agree with you on the team that I had in the rankings was Kentucky, and obviously they played Florida at home, but I think that they looked really strong and they were in a position to win that game, and they kind of fumbled that away.
See, I think this is where you and I are differing. Is obviously they've looked really good, and I think I think getting the job done, winning at the end of the day, especially early in the season, I mean, even at the end of the season, winning a game, especially a close game, has to mean something for me. And that's why I have Kentucky just left out. A couple more wins, if they're able to back up the team that we saw on the field against Florida, don't get me wrong, they're going to be in the rankings.
Oh, yeah.
But I think as of now, the fact that they lost, I can't put them in the rankings. In my rankings.
That's fair. I mean, they're definitely on the doorstep if they're not ranked, yeah.
Oh, without a doubt. They're in that 23 to 30 range probably in terms of, best teams in the country.
Yeah.
And you talk about getting the job done. I mean, why is Penn State still ranked all the way up there? Because they got the job done.
Yeah.
If they don't do that against Pitt,
Michigan,
whole different
Michigan and
ballgame.
Florida, we have them at 10 and 11 in our rankings. I haven't flipped. I haven't flipped in mine, but getting the job done.
No matter what happens, if you win the game, you're not going to fall far. So
that's the basic coach speak term from any pregame, postgame press conference is our plan is win the football game, so justifiably that should be valued over everything else for sure.
And I fully do agree with that as well.
Alrighty, guys, what were your top sixes? For me, I had Ohio State 6, Oklahoma 5, Georgia 4, LSU 3, Alabama 2, Clemson number 1. Obviously, those SEC teams will work it out. 3 SEC teams will not be getting in.
Yeah.
The reason I have LSU over Georgia is because the Texas win. I think Joe Burrow is the most improved player in the entire country. I think their offense is what this year separates them from previous LSU teams. Coach O's finally, he's more stubborn, ground and pound, Leonard Fournette, Darius guys, give the ball, run it up the middle, control the clock. This year they've moved to a much more explosive offense. They got weapons on the outside with the likes of Justin Jefferson, brother of former national championship quarterback Jordan Jefferson.
Yep.
Throwback to the All-SEC national title game. But
Good times.
yeah, that they separated it for me. That the Texas win, the definitive win. Grant Delpit is arguably the best player in the entire country at the safety position for LSU, and what makes them able to beat Alabama this year is their ability to throw the ball down the field with Joe Burrow. He put up 400 plus yards against a Texas defense that beat Georgia a year ago. I know I'm not trying to discount a year ago, because that shouldn't matter, and it doesn't. However, I think the type of players and the talent that Texas has on defense is evident by what they were able to accomplish last year, and even in the first couple of games of this season. So that's where it is for me. I've seen more on the field and a better performance on the field from LSU than I have from Georgia.
Well, no, it's an interesting. I mean, I looked at it more just in the AP Bowl. Honestly, you kind of convinced me that maybe I should switch
convincing,
my.
yeah.
I tried not to look at preseason polls, and when I first start and when I look at the thing, just rank on what I've seen on the field, who's won, who's lost, common opponents, strength of schedule, all of that, who they've played, how they've looked.
I guess I didn't mean preseason polls. I meant more from, just looking at the AP poll from before this past weekend's games, and then shifting the rankings based on what happened was my justification for keeping the top 7, I think, or even 8 teams the same as it was the week before, because they all played cupcake teams. They all blew them out. But, yeah, I mean, you make a good point, because Georgia's toughest non-conference game was the opener against Vanderbilt. So,
And that's a conference game.
Oh, excuse me. You're right. Yeah, that's just not division. Yeah, exactly. It's still a conference game, and they win 30-6 or whatever, but it doesn't compare to playing LSU. And Georgia, we keep mentioning that game. They're gonna have their chance this weekend
against Notre Dame. Yeah, depending on how they look against Notre Dame, we can compare the two games, the Texas game and the Notre Dame game. Let's say they both win. That will be a comparison, because Texas and Notre Dame, I think, are along the same levels. They're all in that.
Oh yeah.
Texas, Notre Dame, Georgia, LSU, Ohio State, Oklahoma, all those teams in that are just chasing LSU, or not chasing LSU, chasing Alabama and Clemson right now.
Yeah.
So we're going to see what Georgia's made of. We saw what LSU is made of. They went on the road in Austin. Joe Burrow had one of the best games in the entire year so far. Most improved player in the country, in my opinion. Honestly, he's one of the Heisman frontrunners so far earlier this season, along with Jalen Hurts, even Tua Tagovailoa for that matter. Jonathan Taylor, you can put his name in that. Jerry Jeudy, maybe. Justin Ross from Clemson, maybe one of the other underrated, broke out in the playoff last year. But that for me, that's why I had LSU above Georgia.
I put LSU at 6, and if I had heard you talk about them before, I probably would have put them a little higher. Of course, I agree with their very convincing argument, but I just feel like they haven't quite shown enough over the past couple seasons to justify it. And I know that it's college football, and I know that you shouldn't be looking back, a year or two ago. But when you look at the top 4, I think that the rankers really do, and I think that there is just kind of this reputation bias that does happen, and it's very real. And because of that, I have them at 6, and then I have Oklahoma, and I have Ohio State at 4, which is also different than our communal rankings.
Oh yeah, we'll get into
We'll
that
get into
later.
that, yeah.
We'll get into that. But what was your justification for Ohio State over Oklahoma?
Ohio State, I think, is just built so well. I think that as the season goes on, they have J.K. Dobbins, they have Justin Fields. They're going to be able to wear defenses down. Defenses are going to be tired and injured. And I think that they're just going to be able to run over people.
Okay.
And, Oklahoma's looked great, but, again, their strength of schedule isn't there as much as it is for Ohio State. And I think that, I think so far Ohio State has looked very impressive.
And Chris, what was your top 6 exactly? We'll get into the shows in just a second.
I mean, you can look at the AP poll, and my top 6 would be the same. Clemson, in order from 1 to 6, Clemson, Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Oklahoma, and Ohio State. But to be completely transparent, I'll stick by my word. After, listening to you, I think I would, for this week, put LSU at 3, Georgia at 4, because Georgia's going to have their chance this week while LSU plays. I don't know who they're playing. They're definitely not playing a ranked team like that. So, while LSU plays whoever, Georgia's going to have their chance to win that ball game at home and, move back into the top 3. I mean, it was just, my justification is just you look at the rankings the week before, and I just didn't see, when you look at 1 through 6, there was no results that made me feel like anyone should hop anyone. But
yeah, it's hard to shift around when every team's winning.
When every team is winning a blowout.
That's the nature of the beast, yeah.
Alrighty, now for the show's top 6 rankings. At number 6, Oklahoma. Number 5, Ohio State. Number 4, LSU. Number 3, Georgia. Number 2, Alabama. And number 1, Clemson. Starting with Oklahoma, Lincoln Riley is probably the best offensive mind in college football right now. Maybe in football, in general. Andy Reid, he's up there with them in terms of play calling, what he's been able to do with Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, and now Jalen Hurts is unbelievable.
I was amongst the people that were shocked to see Cliff Kingsbury get an NFL job before Lincoln Riley, but to each his own. You never know what's going on behind closed doors, and whatever happened. But you're right. There's really no, other than the Nick Sabans and the Dabo Sweeneys and whoever, on and on, there's really no comparison.
I mean, I'd imagine Lincoln's pretty happy with his job right now, but...
Yeah, I don't see why he wouldn't be. It's got to be a lot of fun so far.
For real.
And we know what Oklahoma has offensively with the likes of Jalen Hurts. The guy, dual threat. He's looked so much better throwing the ball. We already talked about him a bit. He looks so much better throwing the ball. Running the ball, he's an absolutely so hard to tackle. Such a physical runner. And Trey Sermon's no joke at running back. He can pick up some very, very big chunks yardage of play. Obviously can bust out a 60-yard run out of nowhere. And CeeDee Lamb, another one of the better better wide receivers in the entire country. Big, physical, can run, go up and get the football. Oklahoma's going to put up points. They're probably going to win a lot of their games this season. I don't see them losing more than 1 or 2 games at all. Possibly going undefeated and pushing for a playoff spot. It's just they don't play any defense. Last season, they were the worst pass defense in the entire country. They're not right now because they haven't played anyone really that good, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, it came out to show against Alabama in that playoff game, I think, and like you said, they haven't really played anyone yet, but I really just watching the interviews. I know this isn't so much on the field, but watching the interviews with Jalen Hurts is just very intriguing to me.
Yeah, who is it? Was it one of the interviews in the first game goes, "How do you feel about this game? Got to be better." You broke records for the first ever debut in an Oklahoma jersey. He's like, I don't care. I want to win. And it seems like he is so motivated to beat Alabama.
Oh, yeah.
And to beat Tua Tagovailoa and prove everyone wrong.
Yeah, without explicitly saying it, he seems like that is number one in his mind, and he is that is his goal. And after that win against UCLA, it was like an ESPN interview, asked him something, whatever, you're 3-0, and he's like, I don't want to hear that rat poison about us being 3-0. It's like this guy doesn't fool
here's
around.
the thing, he takes a lot after Nick Saban.
Yeah,
I mean, the love for each other is probably a lot.
very strong and very mutual.
Exactly, very strong, very mutual. Moving on to Ohio State, they've looked good.
Yeah.
Haven't had a true test yet. But yeah, I mean, Justin Fields so far has looked good under Ryan Day in his offense. J.K. Dobbins, another one of those really, really good running backs. Defensively, they're very good. Chase Young is maybe the best pass rusher in the entire country, going to be a top pick in next year's draft. Adubka, Jeffrey Adubka, the cornerback. Another one of the top players, defensive backs in the country. It looks like he's going to be the next great Ohio State defensive back. So yeah, they've looked good, but another one of those teams where they're like super duper talented. Don't necessarily know what we're going to get. I had Oklahoma above Ohio State because I feel like I know what I can get out of Oklahoma more based on Lincoln Riley's history as a coach versus Ryan Day being a first-year head coach.
That's fair. Yeah. And Ohio State's not really going to get a chance to prove themselves until they play, Wisconsin, and that's 5 weeks down the road. So
Yeah, it's a lot of those middle of the pack.
Nebraska's not terrible.
Nebraska and Michigan State, those will be tests for them. We'll see what type of team they are against those teams because those are very respectable, solid football teams right there. They're not slouches. Miami, Ohio, they're going to blow them out.
Yeah.
Miami of Ohio is not athletically, physically, talent-wise, it's not even be close.
And I think just something to keep in mind is like you say, the Miami-Ohio game has no suspense to it, but the 2 weeks after that, the Nebraska and Michigan State, two teams that were ranked, and which means they have enough talent on paper
to beat them.
Compete, exactly. And Ohio State goes into those games. If those two teams are still unranked going into those games, Ohio State knows that the teams that they're chasing are playing ranked teams. So when we're playing these unranked teams, we need to win by a lot.
True.
And if they can, that's pressure. And if they can live up to that and blow out those teams or, win by a respectable margin, which I hate to bring that up and that, it kind of ruins like the true score of a game, but that's what it comes down to in a playoff race. And if they can't do that, I think they're going to deserve serious consideration to move up. But for now, 6 seems justified.
And look, if they can run on Michigan State, then that's going to prove a lot because that run defense, as we mentioned,
is probably the best
elite.
in the country.
Yeah.
Probably the best in the country. LSU at 4, we talked a lot about them. Joe Burrow, I keep saying, Joe Burrow has been so great.
Yeah.
Joe Burrow's been unbelievable so far this season. Coach O, you gotta love Ogeron.
Oh, yeah.
How do you not? The raspy voice. That guy is probably one of the most best motivators in the entire country.
Yo.
You know that LSU is going to show up to play every single day in practice, every single game. Defensively, they're LSU. They're not as good as they have been in years past. However, Grant Delpit, like I've been saying, arguably the best player in the entire country. Offense, defense, safety, position-wise, whatever you want to say, he's phenomenal. Chiason's great pass rusher. He's up there with the likes of Chase Young. And like I said, LSU is a very, very good football team. They proved it on the road in Austin. And we'll see if they can make it through the SEC West. We'll see it with Alabama. We'll see with Georgia in the SEC East. But as of right now, they're easily, for me, the number 3 team in the country. But for our combined rankings, number 4.
You gotta love what Ogeron has done because I believe it was last season when they lost to Troy. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that 2 seasons ago when they lost to Troy early in the season at home? I mean, that's a terrible loss, and that sets you as a coach just, that's a terrible place to start. And, I mean, look at how they've bounced back. This program, like you said, really responds to this guy, and you gotta love what Joe Burrow's doing. He was a respectable quarterback.
He was a
last
system
year.
quarterback.
Yeah.
A game manager.
Right. Almost 2,900 yards, 16 touchdowns, 5 picks. A nice passer rating of 133.
Efficient, but much more of a run-based team.
Yeah, and he's coming out this year. He's already thrown for over 1,100. He has 11 touchdown passes this year through 3 games. He had 16 all of last year. So that improvement and that jump when they're playing, like we mentioned, real teams in Texas, it says something, and that's definitely nothing to be overlooked.
Yeah, and they got Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's a good running back. So, they're a good football team, and I think they are finally getting the respect, at least Coach O is, as a coach, after beating Texas on the road.
Yeah, no, 100%. They're a good team.
Moving on to Georgia, experienced quarterback Jake Fromm, played in a national championship, now in his junior season. Probably the best collection of running backs in the entire country, with DeAndre Swift, who might be the best, and Zaire Smith. Yeah, DeAndre Swift and Zaire Smith. Yeah. A little bit of a tongue twister there for some reason. But, 5-star a year ago, number 1 recruit in the country in terms of running backs. We know what they can do on defense. Everyone's been kind of saying, going into the year is Alabama, Clemson, and then Georgia. Georgia can match with them physically. I think LSU can. I think Ohio State can. So, there are other teams that I think can match with them up on that level, close to it. Not quite, but Georgia's a darn good football team. Big game against Notre Dame this weekend. We're going to see whether or not they really are the 3rd best team in the country, what people are saying going into the year.
Yeah, I agree. I think we've talked a lot about that matchup and a lot about this team, and it's going to be really interesting.
Running back, you just saw that Instagram post. Was it Gurley or someone? That post where it's Gurley, Chubb, and Sony Michel all next to each other, and maybe this is their next crop.
DeAndre Swift is going to be a top draft pick in the next couple of years, probably in this upcoming year's draft, and I think their run offense is really what's going to separate them from Notre Dame this weekend. We'll get into that a little bit more. But Notre Dame gave up over 270 yards rushing to Louisville in week 1. So that's a big concern because Louisville does not have DeAndre Swift. And if Notre Dame commits to the run too much, they can go play action with Jake Fromm. Jake Fromm, like I said, experienced quarterback, former 5-star or 4-star, former high recruit. Or I think it was 5-star. Oh, he's a 5-star. He's a 5-star. Yeah. The guy just wins. He's won, I believe, he's only lost a couple games at Georgia. It's like 2 or 3 games at Georgia? So, Kirby Smart's hell of a defensive coach. Good football team.
He's really, they really have responded well to Fromm over this last season and then this one. It's going to be really fun to watch that game.
Exactly. And I'm excited to see how Fromm has grown from much more of a game manager to, maybe now being more of a guy that controls the offense with his arm more. Obviously, he hasn't had to do it too much yet. They played Vanderbilt and a bunch of nobodies. But, moving on to 2-1, Alabama and then Clemson. Guys, I think these two are in a league of their own at the moment. 4 straight years they've played 2-2. Are we going to get part 5? Is this going to be a tiebreaker? We'll see. Dabo Swinney and Nick Saban are the 2 best head coaches in the country right now. They just absolutely reload and reload and reload. It seems like they got 3 first-round picks, on defense, replaced by 3 first-round picks the following year.
Yeah, and it's pretty self-explanatory why you have Clemson at 1 and Alabama at 2, and Clemson, had to beat Texas A&M, and on top of obviously being an undisputed national champion, by the way, they won those 2 playoff games, and a year ago, and Alabama's big win was against Duke, 42-3. They went on the road and handily beat a South Carolina team last week, that's good for them. That's good to see, and it justifies that number 2 ranking. But until they play a ranked team, they're not even debatably number 1 over Clemson.
No, but they are so good this year. Obviously Tua, this is probably his biggest year, and he's probably going to go number 1 overall in the draft. And then they have such good receivers. You talked about Judy earlier.
Ruggs, oh my God.
Ruggs, and then Devontae Smith had 136 yards and 2 touchdowns
exactly.
last week. So,
and Clemson's wide receivers are no slouch either.
No.
T. Higgins, going to be a first-round pick. Justin Ross, dark horse Heisman pick. He's a sophomore. Going to be a first-round pick, not next year, but the following year. Amari Rodgers remarkably has recovered from a torn ACL in the spring. one of the better slot receivers in the entire country, son of T. Higgins, former USC offensive coordinator and national champion quarterback for Tennessee. These two teams are just so loaded. And right now, what separates it for me is Trevor Lawrence, I think. I don't know, in last year and, what I've seen on the field so far, both teams struggled a little bit, getting going a bit. I think something we got to discuss is Trevor Lawrence's not lack of ability to break out, but he just hasn't been spectacular like he was at the end of last season. That being said, he hasn't had to be. They've run the ball at Travis Etienne. Trevor Lawrence has looked good on the ground with his legs. And, he's not been awful. He just hasn't been the guy that's probably the most talented quarterback we've seen since Andrew Luck in terms of NFL prospect.
Yeah, great players rise to great occasions. And he, like you said, he has not been in a great occasion yet. So I think we will see it later this year.
Yeah, I mean, he's thrown 830 yards, 5 touchdowns to 5 picks, but this is crazy to say. Clemson is finally playing a cupcake team now in week 4. They've played Georgia Tech, Texas A&M, and then last week, they play Syracuse, which obviously Georgia Tech and Syracuse aren't superstar teams, but those are Power 5 teams, and they still blow them out, even with him, like you said, not looking spectacular, and they've done what they've needed to do.
And Syracuse has given them trouble the past couple years as well. That's been a tough.
I'm not. The thing I'm not too thrilled and not necessarily concerned because the talent is there and he's going to be the number 1 pick. He would have been the number 1 pick a year ago over Kyler Murray, the Heisman winner. He's only completing 60.8% of his passes, which is down from 5% from last year. However, I think it's going to, like you said, it's going to go up big time.
After they play Charlotte this Saturday, I would fully expect that to go up.
Yeah.
And then, I think they're going to walk through the the ACC. I think Clemson's going to be undefeated, the number 1 seed going into the playoff.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet against it.
Or the number 1 or 2. They're going to be number 1 or 2 seed going into the playoff.
They easily could have played their hardest games already when you look at their schedule. I mean, at North Carolina on September 28th.
That's probably
looks
their next.
Like that might be their hardest game remaining in their entire schedule. At NC State November 9th maybe, or at South Carolina to finish the season. You never know. But yeah, like you say, it's going to be a cakewalk through the ACC.
Yeah, they're so good, and Trevor Lawrence hasn't had to be good. We discussed it. It's like when he needs to be good, he's been spectacular. I have no concerns about him whatsoever. I have no concerns about Clemson. I don't really have much about Alabama except for the fact that they play a much harder schedule and their teams that they're going to play that can beat them. But that being said, those teams could obviously beat Clemson as well. Because, SEC championship, chances are they're either going to play Georgia, and if they don't play Georgia, they're going to play Florida. Both teams, legit run defenses, legit pass rushes, legit players on both sides of the football. They got to play LSU and Auburn. Yeah. 2 other top 10 teams. Another one that we have in the top 4. The schedule is rough, but Alabama, offensively this year, is loaded, like we've been saying. It's just Nick Saban's the greatest college football coach of all time. Both these teams are going to get in the playoff. I'd be shocked if it doesn't happen.
Yeah, fully agreed.
And last thought on Clemson is, as far as numbers for Lawrence and Travis Etienne, it's interesting to look at those Georgia Tech and those Syracuse games. It's just an example of you want to take a player's statistics in context of they're going to game plan for their opponent each week. Week 1, they beat Georgia Tech 52-14. Okay, Trevor Lawrence only throws for 168 yards, but Travis Etienne rushes for 205. At Syracuse, you win 41-6. I mean, by the eye test, that looks just as impressive as the 52-14 win. And that latest win against Syracuse, 41-6, Etienne only rushes for 76 yards, but Trevor Lawrence is 5 short of throwing for 400.
Yeah.
It's what great teams do. They game plan for their opponent,
exactly.
And the players will accept their roles in those games.
And you could say Trevor Lawrence's breakout game of the year is probably the Syracuse game. And he's going to put up big numbers. Tua Tagovailoa is going to put up big numbers. Jerry Jeudy is going to put up big numbers. Justin Ross, all those guys. Travis Etienne is going to rush for probably, 1,500 yards? These two teams, I think, are in a class of their own right now in terms of just what they've been able to do over the last few years. Yeah, we're going to get into a little preview of next week. Obviously, the biggest games of the year, Georgia, Notre Dame, probably the biggest game of the year, maybe the biggest game of the year, along with the Texas LSU game a couple weeks ago. And then we'll just go into a couple quick-fire prediction questions. We'll get to all the big ones. USC, Utah, go.
Oh, I would say Utah 31 and USC 17.
Okay. I think that USC will also lose. I think that Utah's going to put up 28. USC is going to put up 21.
I think it's going to be a little high scoring, but at the end of the day, I think Utah's defensive line is what separates them. I take Utah over the Trojans. ASU, Colorado. We don't need to say score predictions.
That's
a little
kind
bit
of tough.
I wanted, earlier in the week, I wanted to pick Colorado just because I know how ASU responds to being ranked. But talking to them this week and also hearing what the Colorado publisher had to say about that team, who seems like they've kind of tripped and stumbled since the Nebraska win. And even before that, I think I'll pick ASU. I would say 24-13.
24-13, okay.
I'll go with ASU as well. I think that they have this new system in place, and like you said, they haven't responded well to being ranked in the past, but this new regime, I think they're going to take care of business.
I think the difference between this and the past was they're at home, and ASU's been a much better football team at home. Obviously, Michigan State was their first big road win under Coach Herm Edwards. I take ASU 27-17. So I say they win by double digits. Let's see some bigger games. Michigan, Wisconsin. I think this is going to be a much closer game. I think, although I think Michigan comes out. I think Shea Patterson has a big game. I think we finally see what he's about. He had a good game against them last year. I think Michigan wins this one. Let's say 30-21. I think they're going to win by quite a bit.
I think we talked about Wisconsin earlier. I think they're going to stay ahead of the 8-ball in this one. I think they're going to beat Michigan 13-10.
Oh, that low scoring.
I think their defense is going to come through.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm expecting kind of a more defensive game, and this seems like the kind of game where there's going to be a weird final score. So I'm going to go with the home team, with the home field advantage making the difference, and Wisconsin winning 19-17.
Okay. I probably overshot the scores, but I still think Michigan wins by touchdown, maybe a little bit more. Alrighty, we'll scroll down. Auburn, Texas A&M. Bo Nix, another test. This is his first big road test. The first one was a neutral site, but being the location of where it was in the South, Auburn probably had a bit more of a stadium control. But this is definitely gonna be a tough game for him. But I do think Auburn comes through. Let's say 30-24.
All right, Kyle Field's a really tough place to play. I think Nix is going to struggle. I think he might pick it up late in the game, but I think A&M's going to come through with the home upset. I think they're going to win 28-24.
Okay.
I'm really teetering, and the two of you having different predictions doesn't help. So I'll say this game goes to overtime, no matter who wins. I think if it goes, Bo Nix, in that Oregon game, like you mentioned, that was closer to a road game than a home game. And you said Kyle Field's a hard place to play. That 12th man is no joke.
Yeah.
But to me, I love what I saw out of him. I'll say 31-27 Auburn in overtime, I might add.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to see what Bo Nix is about because he struggled. I think he's going to struggle at parts in this game.
Yeah.
However, when it comes down to it, I think Bo Nix has got that clutch gene. He's going to make a big play where in the fourth quarter, do something special that gets them over the line.
I think he proved in that Oregon game that even if they fall behind early, they're never out of the game.
That's true.
Washington, BYU, an interesting game. BYU is one of those teams, teetering right below that possible being ranked spot. Beating USC a week ago. Obviously, you're a lot higher in Washington than we are. What do you think? Is it going to be a blowout?
I mean, this one's at BYU, so it's going to be a little tough, but I think that UW will pull through pretty handily near the end. I think BYU might keep it close, as they did against Utah in the first half, but at the end of the game, I think Washington's going to have it in hand, 38-20.
Oh, okay. I don't think it's that much. I'm going 31-20, but
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the fact that this is a road game changes everything because that 38-20 score, if this is in Seattle, I would be closer to that. But I think because it's in Utah and BYU's feeling themselves right now, I think it's 26-20 Washington.
Yeah, and I think this game could be a lot closer, especially if Jacob Eason starts turning the ball over. If he starts turning the ball over and BYU gets some momentum, this game's gonna go down to the wire. If it's BYU keeps it close. All right, moving on. Let's find another one. Oklahoma State, Texas. Oklahoma State 3-0 so far this season.
Speaking of teams right outside the rankings,
Chuba Howard's looked really good in the run game so far. How do you think this game goes?
See, it's in Austin, and I know we keep bringing up the stadium each game's in, but I think we all know how important home field is,
especially in college football. Exactly.
Yeah, with student athletes, and though Texas, this is traditionally the kind of games they lose because they're probably thinking higher of themselves. They rebounded nicely from that LSU loss, and so I think if I'm going to pick an upset, this is going to be it. I'll go out on a limb. I'll say Oklahoma State comes away with this one 30-27.
That's fair. I respect the upset pick, but we just spent the whole show talking about how good of a team Texas is.
Yeah.
I don't see them losing this one. I think that they'll take it 28-17.
I think it's going to be a little bit more high scoring. This is the Big 12 we're talking about.
That's
This is
right.
the Big 12 we're talking about.
Yeah, we're the 40s and 50s.
You're right.
42-38, Texas.
Okay.
I think it's going to be close. They got a good offense. Spencer Sanders has looked pretty good so far. Chuba Howard can run the football. But in the end of the day, I think Sam Ehlinger, another one of those guys that just gets the job done, and he's a winner.
He's looked better every year that he's started.
Alrighty. Now the big one. Georgia, Notre Dame.
Want to take this first?
I think it's got to be Georgia. Notre Dame looks great, but they choked last year in the playoff, and obviously against a very good Clemson team. But Georgia is dominant, and they are an SEC power. And I think that they'll take this one over Notre Dame, 35-27.
Yeah, I can see it right now being one of those games. It's a great football game for 50 minutes or longer, and then as you get into the end and the fatigue starts to set in,
and Georgia's run game just starts to dominate. I feel that.
Yeah,
That's the way I see it going too.
And so in the end, I don't know if I want to make it too high scoring of an end result, but I'll probably say it's a lot of similar scores, but I'll say 31-24 Georgia.
Okay. See, I want this game to go down to the wire.
I know.
We need a top 10, a lot like the LSU Texas game.
Yeah.
But I am also picking Georgia. Let's say 31-27. I think that the run game is really where they're just going to be able to dominate. Because Notre Dame, like I said earlier in the show, kick the mic. Okay, anyway, like I said earlier in the show, Notre Dame gave up almost 280 rush yards against Louisville. Obviously, their run defense was a bit sloppy. Their assignments are going to be better this game. However, DeAndre Swift is no joke. And I think at the end of the day, I think Georgia will come away with a victory this weekend. But I'm just so excited for this weekend. Any closing thoughts before we end up the show?
I think college football fans are going to get what they deserve this weekend after
finally, baby,
last weekend. Iowa State and ASU Michigan State were the best games, and that's taking nothing away from those teams.
Those were gritty, sloppy, or not sloppy, or not necessarily sloppy, but a lot of defense. There's gonna be some more offense. It's gonna be both ways.
If you're as true of a football fan as I am, you enjoyed those games as much as I did. But if an 18-17 and 10-7 final were two of the three most exciting games of the week, yikes!
Those were very entertaining defensive matchups. It's just that the offenses on those teams weren't good or weren't that good. These couple games, we're gonna see teams that can play both sides of the football. And I mean, top 10 matchup. How can that not get you excited?
Yeah.
No, this is a college football weekend, and
this is finally what we've been deserving. I'm super pumped. I hope all you guys listening are super pumped. We'll see you next week. I'm Chas Messman alongside Chris Gleason and Ike Everard. Peace!